Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Vijeta, and today we shall be doing some MCQs of logical reasoning with Elizabeth and Darcy here. So let us begin. Which of the following is true about cogent or cogent arguments in inductive reasoning? I have not included the other statements. The right statement is that a cogent argument is strong with true premises. And why is that? Because in inductive reasoning, an argument is considered cogent if it is strong. That is, the premises provide good support for the conclusion, and the premises are true. This makes the conclusion highly probable. An argument that draws a broad conclusion based on a small sample size commits which logical fallacy? It is hasty generalization. Because hasty generalization occurs when a conclusion is drawn from a sample that is not large enough or not representative of the entire population, leading to an overgeneralized or biased conclusion. Which of the following best represents a straw man fallacy? The right answer is we should reduce the use of plastic bags. And why is that? Because the straw man fallacy misrepresents or exaggerates an opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. Here, reducing plastic bag usage is misrepresented as wanting to ban all plastics. Which of the following is an example of a false dichotomy fallacy? You are either with us or against us. This is a false dichotomy fallacy. Because a false dichotomy fallacy or a false dilemma, it presents a situation as having only two options when there are actually more. The statement assumes there are only two opposing sides without considering other possibilities, which is the reason why this is a false dichotomy fallacy. Which fallacy occurs when a person argues that an idea is true simply because it hasn't been proven false? Appeal to ignorance. Because appeal to ignorance, argumentum and ignorentium are the name for it, asserts that a proposition is true simply because it has not yet been proven false, or vice versa. So that is why. An argument that uses a general principle to reach a specific conclusion is known as deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, as we know, starts with a general principle or premise and uses it to reach a specific, logically certain conclusion. So that is why deductive reasoning is the right answer. If someone uses circular reasoning to support their argument, which of the following is happening? The conclusion is assumed in one of the premises. Because circular reasoning is a type of fallacy where the conclusion is included in the premises, or where the argument goes in a circle, assuming what it is supposed to prove. Because you see the example, there are a lot of examples of circular reasonings, like a bachelor is unmarried because he has not married, or the Bible is true because God has written it, and so on. A lot of examples that I will share with you presently. Which of the following best describes the slippery slope fallacy? If we allow students to redo their assignments, they will eventually demand to pass without even studying. This is a slippery slope fallacy. Because the slippery slope fallacy, as we know, it suggests that a relatively small action or event will lead to a series of increasingly drastic consequences, often without evidence to support the chain reaction. So that is why. Which of the following fallacies involve attacking the person making the argument rather than the argument itself? It's ad hominem. The ad hominem fallacy occurs when an argument attacks the person rather than addressing the argument itself. It diverts attention from the issue by discrediting the person making the claim. Which of the following best represents the straw man fallacy? Misrepresenting an opponent's argument to make it easier to refute. That is a straw man fallacy, and we know that a straw man fallacy involves exaggerating, distorting, or and misrepresenting an opponent's argument in order to make it easier to attack or refute. An argument that relies on the claim that something is true because an expert or authority said it commits which fallacy? Appeal to authority. The appeal to authority fallacy occurs when someone argues that a claim is true simply because an authority figure or expert believes it to be true, without presenting any other evidence. If someone argues that because something is popular, it must be true, which fallacy are they committing? Appeal to popularity. The appeal to popularity fallacy suggests that a proposition must be true because many people believe it or because it is widely accepted. When someone argues that a statement is false simply because it is associated with a particular group or person, they are committing genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy occurs when a claim is accepted or rejected based on its origin or history rather than its merit or truth. What type of fallacy assumes a conclusion without providing evidence, often by restating the conclusion in different words? Begging the question. Begging the question occurs when an argument's premises assume the truth of the conclusion instead of providing evidence for it, leading to circular reasoning. The appeal to popularity fallacy suggests that a proposition must be true because it is widely accepted. Popular acceptance of an idea is not a valid criterion to judge its truthfulness. Yes. And actually, in both of these statements, you can see that there is some truth because you see, appeal to popularity ad populum fallacy asserts that something is true because many people believe it. And the popularity of an idea does not determine its truthfulness in actuality. A lot of things that are popular, they are not really good or they are not really true, as we can see in contemporary or pop culture. So, yeah. The ad hominem fallacy attacks the person rather than the argument. This fallacy does not strengthen the argument by highlighting the opponent's flaws. Exactly. The ad hominem fallacy attacks the person making the argument rather than addressing the argument itself. And it weakens rather than strengthens the argument. A false dichotomy fallacy restricts choices to only two options when more options exist. Presenting complex issues as having only two possible solutions is an example of a false dichotomy, as we know. And it actually simplifies a situation by presenting only two choices, ignoring other alternatives, which can lead to a flawed understanding of the issue. The appeal to emotion fallacy uses emotional manipulation rather than logical arguments to persuade. And emotional appeals are not always invalid in argumentation. See, while appeal to emotion can be a fallacy when used to manipulate, not all emotional appeals are inherently invalid. They become fallacious when they replace logical reasoning. This might look a little bit tricky, but actually it is true. The slippery slope fallacy argues that a minor action will lead to significant and often negative consequences. The slippery slope fallacy does not always present a valid argument about potential outcomes. Because the slippery slope fallacy suggests that one event will lead to a chain of related events without sufficient evidence. Such arguments are often invalid due to a lack of support for the chain reaction. Equivocation is used to make an argument appear stronger by changing the meaning of a word midway. The equivocation fallacy uses a word with multiple meanings to mislead or confuse. You can see that is used a lot in a lot of debates. And equivocation uses ambiguity in language. That is its main thing, often shifting the meaning of a key term or phrase in an argument, which makes the argument misleading. You can see that a lot in a lot of debates that happen, especially very intellectual debates. The red herring fallacy introduces an irrelevant issue to divert attention from the main topic. Red herring arguments are often used to win debates by confusing the opponent. Exactly. The red herring fallacy introduces irrelevant information to distract from the main issue. It can be used to derail discussions, making it difficult to address the original topic. Again, if you watch a lot of debates, you can see that. The straw man fallacy involves refuting an opponent's argument by addressing a distorted or exaggerated version of it. Using the straw man fallacy makes it easier to refute the original argument. Because the straw man fallacy misrepresents an opponent's position to make it easier to attack. The technique makes it easier to refute the distorted version rather than the actual argument. If a discussion goes on for too long, this is possible. An argument can become distorted by the opponent. A genetic fallacy dismisses an argument based on its origin rather than its merits. Genetic fallacies do not judge arguments based on their logical structure rather than content. Exactly. Because the genetic fallacy attacks an argument based on its source or origin rather than assessing its content or logical structure. This happens a lot. Begging the question is a type of a circular reasoning. Begging the question does not introduce an unrelated premise to the conclusion. Because begging the question is a form of circular reasoning where the premise assumes the truth of the conclusion. It does not introduce a new premise but relies on the conclusion to support itself, which is the reason why it goes on in a circle. Premise and conclusion, they are actually interchangeable, which is the reason why it is called a circular reasoning. An appeal to tradition argues that something must be true because it has been practiced for a long time. We are all familiar with this. This fallacy ignores whether the practice is logical or beneficial in the current context. And the appeal to tradition fallacy relies on tradition as a justification without considering its relevance or benefit in the present situation. So, that is that. The appeal to authority fallacy assumes that an argument is true because a respected figure supports it. This fallacy is not valid even if the authority is an expert in the relevant field. Because an appeal to authority can be fallacious if it relies solely on the authority's opinion rather than evidence. Even if the person is an expert, it is not sufficient to justify the argument unless the authority's statement is directly supported by, facts. Providing irrelevant information to divert the topic from the main issue. That's a red herring fallacy, as we have discussed. A red herring introduces an unrelated or irrelevant topic to distract attention from the main issue, leading the discussion away from the argument's focus. Yeah, we have discussed that. This fallacy is effective in strengthening one's own position by showcasing the opponent's argument as absurd. The straw man fallacy, exactly, which misrepresents an opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. And, a straw man fallacy occurs when a distorted version of the opponent's argument is presented, making it easier to refute and therefore seemingly strengthening the position of the person using it. With this, I conclude today's lecture. I hope you found these logical reasoning questions interesting, and I hope this will help you. If you have any feedback, comment section is open. Like, share and subscribe, and I will meet you all in the next video. Thank you.